Okay, let's begin. We are, I guess appropriately enough, we're going to continue our discussion of digestion. Last time we talked about just the first step where you ingest the food and the fact that maybe ahead of time you would have marinated it in something acidic, something that maybe has enzymes to break it down, then you chew it up a lot, that in your mouth you've got salivary juices that contain enzymes that break down some carbohydrates, and then they go into the stomach. In the stomach, we saw you've got some churning around to increase the surface area of food coming in contact with the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin, which breaks down proteins. The goal of digestion being that you have to take these long proteins, which are sequences of amino acids, and you have to break them down into individual amino acids that can then be absorbed into your bloodstream. Or if they are complex sugars, you have to cleave each of the simple sugars from them, and those can be absorbed into your bloodstream. We'll see with lipids as well, they have to be broken down before they can be absorbed. So in digestion, it begins in the stomach, and we tend to think of it as only occurring in the stomach, but a lot of it, possibly the majority, some people would say, occurs in the small intestine. The small intestine is going to be, let's see, we had our tooth, our stomach, more pits of the stomach. So this would be a stomach when you've got nothing in it at all. So you see no food particles. There hasn't been secretion of the digestive enzymes. Here we have a cross-section of the small intestine. The small intestine, we'll see, is a tube. It's about 20 feet long. It winds all around your abdominal area. I mean, how else could 20 feet of tubing, it's about an inch in diameter, how else could you fit it in there other than to have it be wound up all around the place? We'll also see that digestion is going to involve a couple of organs. The pancreas is nestled right at the point where the stomach connects to the beginning of the small intestine. Sorry, let me focus that. And what the pancreas is going to do, it has a lot of functions, but two important ones are these. First, it's going to secrete substances that reduce the acidity of the chyme, that sort of acidic, gross material. When you've broken down your food, you've broken a lot of it down with the acid. So it gets neutralized back up to a pH that's more similar to water and most of your body. But the pancreas also secretes some enzymes that digest fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. So a lot of important enzymes are produced by the pancreas. And then the third part here, when digestion is beginning, we're going to have the liver playing a role. It produces something called bile. Bile gets produced in the liver, and then it gets delivered to the gallbladder where it's stored. And from there, it will get secreted into the first stages of your small intestines. And what it does is help to break down the fats that you consume. So you'll see that you have different enzymes working on the fats, different enzymes on the carbohydrates, different enzymes on the proteins. But the important things here are you haven't broken things down into their component macromolecules. All you've done is you've started to break them down with the acid and with some of the enzymes. Now, in many species, we'll see, if you go beyond humans and mammals, here's another picture. I'm going to talk about the small intestines. One of the important aspects of them, if you go back here, you can see when the chyme gets squirted out of the stomach and into the small intestines, it's got all these finger-like projections sticking out from the wall, and those are so that you can have lots of the fluid that has the nutrients that you've consumed, that they can be in contact with the surface, because only there are you getting secretion of the enzymes to break down the materials that are in there. So same thing here. You'll see very high amount of surface area. Interestingly, if you take a rodent and you put it on a caloric restriction diet, you cut the amount of food that it can eat, it increases dramatically. Like over the course of 8 hours, you can get a significant increase in the surface area because suddenly the animal, its perception is, hey, times are tough. We need to try and extract more out of the food than we currently are. Now, in a lot of species, we see that bacteria help out with, this is just a picture of the gallbladder. It's just another sort of storage body. Gets filled up. But here we have a bunch of bacterial cells. So inside your gut, these are bacteria. But in species like termites, so termites are insects, but they have bacteria living in their digestive system. And the bacteria happen to have the capacity to break down cellulose. So the termite goes and munches on a bunch of wood. Without these bacteria, it can't break it down. Just like if you eat lots of cellulose, you were to chew on a stick for a while, you're not going to be able to break down the cellulose. Termites can't do it either, except that they have these symbiotic bacteria living in their gut, and when the cellulose of the wood gets sent down their digestive system, the bacteria go to work on it. They can break the bonds of these complex carbohydrates that are cellulose, and as they break the bonds one by one, they use some of the cellulose for themselves, some of the sugars that are released, but a lot of them just become available to the termite. So the termite's sitting there, it just chewed on a stick, and all of a sudden it has the sensation of lots of sugars being available to it. Question? They have some enzymes that are involved. The only story I know about them regurgitating generally is early on in their life, the mother will regurgitate for her offspring, and they will chew what she regurgitates so that they get the bacteria into their gut. Wouldn't surprise me if they also have some acids that help in the breaking down of it, but I do know that without the bacteria that have the enzymes, they can't do it. Leeches have a similar kind of symbiotic relationship in that, here we have 1 second, some blood off of the back of someone. Sorry, it's a gross picture. But they have bacteria inside their digestive system that breaks down blood proteins. They don't have the capacity to do it, but they can get access to the amino acids that are in the blood, and then those amino acids get shared by the bacteria that break them down and the leech. It would be great if humans could somehow develop a symbiotic relationship with bacteria that were cellulose digesting, because that would increase our ability to consume plant material and extract energy from it. For some reason, that just has never evolved, that relationship. Here's a question. I've already brought this up before, but it's relevant now that we're talking about digestion. And that's the issue of milk, that some adults can't consume milk. They can when they're children, but then as they get older, their ability to continue producing the enzyme lactase goes away. Lactose is a disaccharide that's in milk. So it's a sugar, but it's a disaccharide. So it is a glucose and another simple sugar called galactose, but they're stuck together. And the fact that they're stuck together, if you can't break the bond between them, then that glucose attached to the galactose will go all the way through your system, and it gets to the very end of your digestive system. We'll see in your large intestine where you have bacteria that are just breaking down what's left over. They can usually break it down, and what will happen as a byproduct of them breaking it down, they produce lots of gas, and it can make you feel really uncomfortable, not so good. That's because the adults are not producing lactase in their small intestines. Most people are. Now, what's a way around this if you have this problem? Is there anything you can do so that you can actually digest milk? So the question is, even if it's not a chronic problem, can it vary on a day-to-day basis? Can milk make you sick sometimes but not others, or some days can you consume more or less? Yes, what happens is that most people who have this problem, they have the gene that codes for the enzyme lactase, and it's a question of, is it producing enough? And so what will happen, and nobody understands how it's regulated. Usually it's the presence of the milk causes it to be produced. But some days it'll be spooled up, producing lactase at a very high level, and you can digest it. Other days it won't be at all. And that's sort of how it goes away, that initially, sometime around the age 18 to 20, 25, it's on its way out. The gene isn't functioning as well anymore, and you get further and further along the way, and instead of having good days and bad days, you have all bad days. Very rare, though, to have the gene not function in childhood. I think about this because my son Jack still likes to drink bottles, and I have these 8-ounce bottles that I make for him, and he loves them. And the doctor says, yeah, usually when they're about 2.5, they stop using the bottle. Well, he's 3 now, and he has 8 bottles a day, so 64 ounces of milk. How much is that in terms of, it's a half gallon? It's some huge amount. He's not a very big guy, but some people have no problem breaking it down, but every time we walk out the door, he wants a bottle for the road, and it's hard to say how long that will last, but in most people it tends to, their ability to consume milk wanes. I want to talk about one other thing related to digestion here. There's some adaptations. One of them has to do with your standard mammal. So if you have something like a coyote, they have a digestive system, and this is very similar to yours. It's a terrible drawing, sorry, but it comes down. The stomach is just part of the tube, but it gets expanded a little bit. Out of the stomach, you start into the small intestine, and that, I said, is 20 feet of tubing. Then there's something called the cecum that here in the coyote is really just a pouch attached to the end of the small intestines. Then you go into a larger tube that is called the colon, or the large intestine. And I'll talk about that when we get to elimination. This would be your basic digestive system. This is how it looks in you. This is how it looks in most mammals. But there's an exception to this, which I'll show you. I'll give you a chance to write that down. The thing I want to compare it with is a similarly sized mammal, which is the koala bear. And the koala bear, you'll see, has this. It's got the stomach, and then it's got the small intestine. And then that thing that was the pouch, this little cecum, actually becomes a massive pouch, all coiled around. Then it continues on to the large intestine, which is a little bit longer. I'm going to talk about why that is. I'll let you draw it first. I'm going to give away these cookies, too. Tell me if you want some cookies. I got to get rid of them or I'll eat them. All right. I got about 10 more. What we're going to see is that in the cecum, there are bacteria that live with in the koala bear's digestive system, and they can break down cellulose. So just as I told you that it would be cool if we could do it in humans, in the koala bear they actually can do it. We got 3 left. All right, here, pass them down to that guy. 2 left. So what happens is that the koala bear, they've evolved to have this symbiotic relationship with these bacteria. And they have this 2-meter-long cecum that is essentially a fermentation chamber. It's just a compartment where they chew up these eucalyptus leaves. Their diet consists almost exclusively of eucalyptus leaves. They chew them up. They're very undigestible to most mammals, but they get through the stomach, through the small intestines, and then they go into the cecum where you've got bacteria and you've got it can just sit there for a while. And what happens is that because it's this large chamber where it can break down over a longer period of time, they then can absorb more nutrients from their diet. Now, in the case of the coyote, because they don't consume a huge diet that is largely undigestible, they mostly eat meat, they don't have the need for this. Same thing goes for humans. Sorry, I'll put this here. In humans, in humans, the cecum is called the appendix, so it's become detached even. And the appendix used to be this chamber where maybe some cellulose could be digested. So now the question is, what happens if you have your appendix removed? You can't eat eucalyptus leaves and digest them. Yes, and what happens if you don't have your appendix removed? You can't eat leaves and digest cellulose. So there's no problem from a digestive perspective. It is a holdover. There was a time in our evolutionary past where there was some use for that part of the digestive system, but it's not there anymore. And so if you have your appendix removed, there's no penalty at all. It's actually a great way to lose, half a pound if you want to. No, you don't want to do it for that. So it's the cecum. It's a little pouch at the end of the small intestine before the large intestine. It's a chamber where you get fermentation, where you've got some bacteria as well, and the koala bear is able to break it down. They still have to eat almost nonstop, the koala bear, these eucalyptus leaves, because it's so difficult to extract much nutrition from them. Okay, so going back to the small intestine, here is just another picture of them. Again, the important thing is that in the small intestine, we're going to have both digestion and absorption continuing. So first there is the continued breakdown of these complex macromolecules into simple sugars and amino acids and smaller fatty acids, but then they have to be absorbed. And the more surface area you have, the more ability you will have to absorb them. So if this 20-meter tube that's an inch long were to be laid out and you were to calculate the surface area, they say it's about the size of a 28-inch diagonal TV would be the surface area. But based on all of the ups and downs and these microvilli projections, they say it's closer to a tennis court in terms of the area, 300 square meters. So you have lots more ability to digest and absorb. So one of the chief functions, there are a couple here, one of the chief functions of the small intestines would be this, that your energy-rich food particles get taken from the digestive tract into the body. And the secret would be the large surface area. This is one of the areas of digestion and absorption that's not super well understood, how the actual amino acids and simple sugars get pulled from inside the digestive system into the bloodstream and the cells of the body. It's not clear. As part of surgery, sometimes people will have growth. The lining of your small intestines tends to be rapidly dividing cells because you're constantly sending food down through it, and it gets abraded, and you've got lots of enzymes working there. It's a pretty harsh environment for a cell, so the cells don't last very long, and what happens is that they have to turn over at a high rate. Anywhere in your body that you have cells dividing at a high rate, there's a pretty high probability that at some point you might get something developing into uncontrolled cell division, which can turn into a tumor. So frequently you'll hear of people having to have various masses of cells, various masses of cells removed from their small intestine. And what they'll do is they will cut out a section. So out of the 20 feet, you might hear of someone having, my grandmother at one point had to have about 6 feet of her intestines removed. And they just said, oh, there are problems all along there. And she was pretty old at the time. But what happened after they removed all the small intestines was kind of surprising to me. Although if I think about it now, I shouldn't be surprised. What do you think happens? What's that? No, it did affect the digestive system. Now, you would think the surface area would increase, but it doesn't. The length doesn't actually increase. What do you think? She probably ate more. Yes, exactly. She lost a ton of weight, and she found that she could just eat. And what was going on? Because you have this long, essentially a conveyor belt that the food moves down, and you're pulling nutrients out of it, and you just cut off about a third of it, what happens is that lots of your food passes through you undigested. And so you eat tons of food, but you tend not to gain as much weight because you are not absorbing the nutrients from the food. Question?
Do you think that has anything to do with like some people who can eat more?
The question is, do I think that is related to the fact that some people can eat a lot more than other people and not gain weight? Yeah, I think that certainly could be part of the variation. Longer or shorter digestive system. What I would want to do is I wouldn't personally want to do this, but I'd want to hire someone to take all the feces, collect them, and dry it out and figure out what the dry weight is, and then analyze it and see, are they eliminating stuff that is still digestible? Question?
What does she do for nutrients?
So the question is, what does she do for nutrients? Yes, it's not just a question of energy. You're also losing potential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and so you generally have to supplement significantly, and you have to try and eat a lot more. In the case of stomach banding surgery, where doctors will surgically go in and they try to make the stomach physically smaller by putting a plastic band around it so that you have the sensation of being full sooner, what's coupled with this surgery nowadays is that they do tend to take the first part of the small intestine and they cut it out. And then they take the end here and they stretch it up here and they reattach it, so that you get a double whammy. You feel full sooner, and the food that you do eat tends to get passed through undigested. And it sounds a little barbaric, but it is so far the only method that has been shown to lead to long-term weight loss in humans. So it is extreme, but for some people that is desirable. There's just a drawing of what I had up there, just to point out the specialization is this. You've got a bunch of muscle, and I don't care about knowing the layers, but there are lots of layers: connective tissue, muscle. You can't make your small intestines squeeze, but it's just this involuntary process. And then you've got through here all of these finger-like projections of cells that are both absorptive and they produce the enzymes to continue breaking down food. Now, by the time the chyme gets through the small intestines and gets to the large intestines, you don't really even call it chyme. There are no nutritionally useful substances in it. There's no energetically useful material in it. So when you get to the large intestine, it's a different process. We're now at the phase of elimination, but also a little bit of recycling. Your body wants to recover as much water as possible from the food that you consume, water that's part of the secretions to help move the food through the system. But in this last phase, by the time you get to the large intestine, you mostly only have water. Ions, by this I just mean some chemicals, sodium, chloride, some small chemicals that are not used for energy. And you've got cellulose because it is non-digestible. So what happens here in the large intestine here we have the colon. The chyme, when it's in the small intestines, tends to be more of a yellowish, greenish. I mean, obviously it depends on what you eat, but by the time it gets to the colon, it's starting to look brown. And from this material, your body is trying to extract as much water as possible. The longer the material stays in your colon, the more water that gets reabsorbed from it. This is where you've got lots and lots of bacterial cells living. So you have E. coli that are living inside of your colon, and these colonies are generally harmless to you, but they live off of undigested material. So they can get some material, some nutritious material from stuff that you consume. In exchange, though, what happens is that as a byproduct of breaking down this undigestible material, they tend to produce chemicals that we use as vitamins. And I'll talk about vitamins in a bit, but it's a beneficial arrangement that you've sent down the stuff, that you've extracted everything you can from it. The bacteria break down a little bit of what's left over, and from that, vitamins are produced, you absorb those, and we'll see that the vitamins help you later on in other aspects of your metabolism. I want to talk about fiber. Fiber is something that I mentioned last time. But it's this odd material that it is defined as undigestible organic materials. It's undigestible, but it's very important in digestion. I've been talking about it mostly as cellulose, but there are other materials that are called gums. There are things like lignins that are also produced by plants for structure and for defense against consumption. So they tend to be byproducts of other things that you consume that do have valuable nutritional materials, and these are just part of the package, so you can't break them down. And so what happens with fiber is that because it can't be broken down, it increases the fecal mass, the mass of material that isn't going to be digested. And the larger the fecal mass is that's moving through you, the more quickly it moves. For some reason, the bigger it is, lots of water gets attached just to whatever the material is. That lubricates its movement through the colon. And what happens is that if you have too much fiber in your diet, because it can't be digested, and you have this, instead of a small mass, you have a big mass, moves through the colon very quickly. And what will happen, because it's moving so quickly, your body doesn't have a chance to reabsorb the water from it. And so you end up with lots of material excreted, and it's very watery. There's another word for that. What is it? Diarrhea. Yeah, so too much fiber can be a problem in that by not allowing your body to reabsorb the water, you end up with diarrhea. It also has these benefits. So it helps move food through your gut. So people who are having trouble moving food through their system, it will help. It can lower your cholesterol, and that's because you've got this mass moving through the system, and you have lots of stuff that just sort of gets attached to it. It can attach to cholesterol, lipids, and it can pull them right out of your body. So your body's like, whoa, wait a minute, we're gonna extract all the energy we can from these things like cholesterol, but it's like, boop, gone. And so your body doesn't get to use it. It's also been associated with reduced colon cancer risk. It's not clear why this is. People think that it might be related to the fact that it's like taking an SOS pad and passing it through your digestive system, and it tends to scrape the walls, and it can take materials that have been in your digestive system for a little bit too long and are irritating it and can remove them. And so they can reduce the rate of cell division in your colon, and that can be good. So too much fiber in your diet can lead to diarrhea. If you don't have enough, what happens is that you have a smaller fecal mass. It moves more slowly. Your body extracts more of the water from it, and that can lead then to constipation, where it slows down more and more and more, and your body can't get rid of the stuff that's undigestible, and that's problematic as well. If you've ever taken antibiotics, sometimes you'll notice that they lead to diarrhea. Not so much now as they used to. There have been significant improvements, but they can lead to vitamin deficiencies. Why do you think that would be? What did I just tell you about a source of vitamins? Exactly. Antibio, for antibiotics. They kill living things. So they might kill something that's making you sick, but they can also kill the harmless bacteria that live in your colon, and that as a result of breaking down some of the fiber in your diet, they produce vitamins. If you kill them off, you can reduce your level of vitamins that you're getting. So people who tend to be on antibiotics for long periods of time have to supplement. All right, so this is our first take-home message. We only have 2 today. Most of the absorption occurs in the small intestines. Most of the water absorption occurs in the large intestines. The enzymes produced by the pancreas and the bile produced by the liver are very important in helping you to break down the macromolecules, including the lipids. About half of the feces that you excrete every day is made up of dead bacterial cells. Bacteria reproduce, they divide after usually about 20 minutes. So the turnover rate of the bacteria that are in your gut is very high. But if they're reproducing every 20 minutes and the number isn't increasing, you're at a stable level, that means that you're producing lots and lots of bacteria that you have to get rid of. So, as I say, half of the fecal mass you produce every day is made up of dead bacterial cells. The other half tends to be just the undigestible fiber. On average, in a mouse, if you give them some food, if it's a good food source, and you weigh all the food that you put into them, and you weigh everything that comes out of them after you dry off all of the water from it, they tend to have an efficiency around 90%. In other words, 90% of that initial mass disappears somewhere inside them that they are able to extract. That was much higher than I would have guessed. I actually did studies on this where I had to, collect everything from the mouse cages for long periods of time. It was kind of disgusting. Then you have to put it on cookie sheets into the oven to dry it off, and it makes a great aroma in your house. But something that's interesting is this. I told you that if you put an animal on a caloric restriction diet, I said that they increase their ability to absorb. But what I actually said was they increase their surface area of their small intestines. So you would think that a rodent that's on a caloric restriction diet would actually be more efficient at extracting nutrients from the food. But it turns out that their digestibility goes down to about 80% or so, which is a little bit perplexing, other than the fact that the problem is if you're a mouse and you are put on a severe caloric restriction, you're kind of in a fragile state. You don't have enough energy to do most of the things you normally do, and so they have greater surface area, but their bodies are not so good at doing almost all their normal functions, don't work as well, and so they have greater surface area but still reduced digestibility. Okay, so I wanted to just summarize the stages. You don't need to write these down, but you can. It's a lot of text on this one. There are 4 phases. The first, ingestion, the important functions of it were these. 1, you want to mash up the food because the whole point of digestion is to break things down into their component parts. Your body cannot absorb into the bloodstream protein. All it can absorb are amino acids. Your body cannot absorb complex carbohydrates. It can only absorb simple sugars. So you got to mash up the food. This is why, remember, if you take something that normally you would chew and you swallow it whole, very frequently your body just can't break it down at all. So it's a disgusting trick to do, but take something like a chili pepper, put it in your mouth, don't chew it up, just swallow it. And your body can't do anything with it. Your stomach tries to get at it. And so what happens? About a day later, you will see it come out the other end, undigested. So the mashing up is important. It's like corn, yes. Growing up, my brother Kevin, who was not a scientist, we had to sit there. He was probably 10 years old, and we had to endure all of his ideas he was having about solving world hunger through corn because of the observations that he had made that you could recycle corn. And so I'm sorry, he's not a scientist. We sent him to work for the government. Anyway, it looks like the corn is there, but you've actually extracted most of the nutrients. It's the cellulose that remains. So you partially digest some of the starch, I told you, through alpha amylase. Then you get to the stomach. Stomach's got three functions, which are to mash up the food again. You got a lot of muscles around it because you want to get as much of the food to come in contact with acid and enzymes as possible. So you mash up the food. You start a little bit of digestion through hydrochloric acid and pepsin, which is breaking down proteins. Secrete some acids that are also going to further denature proteins, breaking them down, but also kill bacteria. Our bodies want to prevent bad things on the outside world from getting inside your body, and so that is an important part of the function of your digestive system, is to be so inhospitable that if you do consume some bacteria for one reason or another, make sure everything has to go through this sort of disinfectant phase before you start absorbing it. And so almost everything that you eat is going to get killed off. Not everything. Every now and then something will pass through. You'll hear about people getting sick from various types of bad strains of E. coli. But most stuff gets killed off. That's why you don't have to be super worried about, everyone jokes about dropping food on the floor and then picking it up and eating it. Almost anything that gets on it is going to be killed off anyway. And you'd be surprised if you looked up close at it anyway. There's already, like those cookies you just ate, they were covered with bacteria. Sorry, I'm kidding. I'm not covered in it. You'd need a microscope to see them. All right, you get to the small intestine. Small intestine is probably the most important part of the whole digestive absorption process. First, you got to neutralize the chyme. So you've had the phase where you are making it an acidic environment so that you can denature the proteins, break down the proteins. So you're done with that. So now you want to neutralize it so it's not so acidic. There's something called bicarbonate. We talked about various other types of bases that can help you if you've got heartburn, acid indigestion. You finish the protein and starch digestion. Bile, remember, that's produced in the liver, sent through the gallbladder, then goes into the small intestines, and that helps to take these lipid that are droplets, and it's like a detergent. It breaks them up and then allows enzymes to get at them. And you start to absorb nutrients. I have H2O in parentheses. There is a little bit of water absorption in the small intestines. Finally, you get to the large intestines. And there, you've got three more functions. And these are to absorb water is the primary function, probably the most important, I'd have to say. Oops, sorry. I just wanted to see if I wanted to see if there was a brighter setting. This is not. That's as bright as I can get it. It then moves the chyme along so that you can get rid of all the undigested material. And you absorb some of the nutrients, including the vitamins that are produced by the bacteria. Sorry, we've been looking at this gross picture here. This is my picture for fiber. Lots of undigestible material there. Lots of nutrients as well. vegetables and fruits tend to have a lot of undigestible material because cellulose is a very common material in plants. So that's the fiber part. Every plant cell has a cell wall around it made up of cellulose, so that is the fiber that you're getting from it. I forgot about all these slides. Here were my pictures of the bacteria that are living in your colon. They're the little orange things. Here are more of them. You probably have, people have estimated, more bacterial cells in your body than cells that are human. So it's that significant, the amount inside of you. So if we had to take a vote, like if you were a democratic organization, you would be primarily bacteria if they all voted bacteria. Antibiotics, killing off. Sorry. I wanted to go down the list of the mouth and the stomach and small intestines. Cute rabbit because all the other pictures are so disgusting. No, but there was a reason why I wanted to put this one up that's not cute. I'll get there in a second. Some foods give us gas. I really didn't mean for this lecture to be gross. Some foods give us gas, though. What's the most common one that you think of? Oh, be careful when you eat that. Beans. The problem with beans comes down to two sugars, one called raffinose, one called stachyose. And these are undigestible by many people. Most people don't have the enzyme that allows them to break these down. The problem is the bacteria that live in your colon do have the ability to break them down. So what happens? It passes through your small intestines, where if you had the enzymes, they would be present there and you would break them down, you would absorb the sugars, and that would be fine. Instead, it goes all the way through to the colon. They start breaking them down. They go nuts. The bacteria love them, but they produce huge amounts of gas, mostly CO2, but it has nowhere to escape, right? It has to come out, either the front end or the back end, but it's a lot of extra gas, and it can be unpleasant, and it's because you can't digest them, they can digest them. If you wanted to figure out a way to help someone digest these, what would you do? Bino. And what do you think Bino is? Enzymes, yes. You can consume the enzymes that allow you to break down the sugars. Same thing goes for lactate. You can't digest milk, you take lactate. It is the lactase. So it's the enzyme that breaks down lactose into glucose and galactose and allows you to get at it. So it's a very good solution. The reason I put the rabbit up here was they are probably the most known example of something called coprophagy. You know what coprophagy is? Do you want to know what coprophagy is? Anyone have a pet rabbit and ever watch them for a long period of time? No? We don't have to talk about it if you don't want. What do they do? Yes, nice hand gesture. Yes, they recycle it. They eat their feces. And, sorry, almost any animal will do it if you stress them out enough. But in the case of rabbits, they do it relatively frequently. They consume their feces, and on the second pass, they just extract additional nutrients. So I told you, hey, mice were about 90% efficient. That's pretty good. But the rabbit is essentially saying 90%, let's do it again. Let's get 90% of that last 10%. And so they can extract more. They will pick around their feces to only consume the stuff that has passed through once, not twice. And as I said, you'll see lots of organisms do it. They tend to be more likely to do it if they are nutritionally stressed. And so rabbits tend to consume a lower quality diet than some omnivorous types of organisms. So they have a greater need for it. All right, so here's our next question. Vegetarians tend to be at a higher risk for protein deficiency than omnivores or carnivores. Let's think about why that is. There's less protein in plants. That's one part of the answer. Plants certainly have proteins, but yes, they don't have as many.
Isn't it animal products are more likely to be are complete proteins, but plants are incomplete?
Yes. So let's talk about what that means. You're saying complete and incomplete proteins. This is something I mentioned once. It really bothers me. I told you that I love looking at the labels on foods because you can see exactly what's in it. How many grams of carbohydrates, how many grams of fats, how many grams of protein. But the problem is it just says this has 20 grams of protein in it. And that makes you think that a gram of protein is a gram of protein is a gram of protein. They're all the same and they're interchangeable. But they're not. And this is where it becomes important if you're a vegetarian. There are 20 amino acids that are needed by animals to build all of the various structures in your body. I told you that lipids were for energy storage, carbohydrates were for fuel, and proteins were for building structures. So you need 20 different amino acids. If you take LS2, for some reason they always want to make you memorize the actual chemical structure of all 20 of these. We're not going to do that. In humans, we can produce 12 of them. We have the ability, remember I told you with PKU, you can convert phenylalanine to tyrosine. Tyrosine is an amino acid, so it's possible for humans who consume one type of amino acid to build another one. So out of the 20, we can produce 12 of them. What does that mean about the other 8? Where do you get them? You have to get them from your food. You can't make them, so you have to eat the other 8. Those are called essential amino acids. And here's where we get into the problem of all proteins not being created equal, is that all animal proteins have all of the essential amino acids. So any animal protein, this might be, you might consume chicken or beef or an egg or milk, and you're going to get all of the amino acids that you need. On the other hand, if you consume something like corn, it's got 6 amino acids in it. If you consume beans, they have 6 amino acids, but they're not the same ones. So if you consume corn and beans together, then you get all of the amino acids you need. Question?
So corn is a protein?
It has some amino acids in it. It's mostly carbohydrates. The problem, one of the big problems for your body is this. It's that you can't store amino acids for very long. So you might say, well, if over the course of the day you consume enough different plant proteins, your body will get all the amino acids. That's true, except that if your body wants to build a particular type of protein and you consume some of the amino acids necessary early in the day and some of them later, it can't store them for more than a couple of hours, and so your body becomes deficient. It can never build the protein that it needs. That's why they talk about protein mixing among vegetarians, where you consume things together so that all together within the meal you get a complete protein. There are some plant products that have all of the amino acids. People used to say, no plant proteins are complete. It's not true. There are a lot of them. There's soybean would be the most common one. There's something else called quinoa. It looks like giant couscous. It's very tasty. But there are a few others that have all of the amino acids, but most of the proteins that you are probably eating if you're a vegetarian are not going to have them all, so you have to mix them together. Here's a quote that is, I think, the silliest quote I've ever read. You know, the Atkins diet? Well, this is the guy, Dr. Atkins. And he was on he did die, yes. He was on the Larry King show, and he said this. He said, vitamins can double your health. I didn't even know what to say. That's the most absurd thing. I wanted to just punch him. Well, because it's downright irresponsible, right? What does this mean? Vitamins can double your health, given that we know a lot about the scientific method. I don't know. I really don't know. If you can come up with something that he meant, that would be good. Let's talk about what vitamins are, though, because more than half of the people in the United States consume some sort of vitamin supplement. Doesn't tend to be dangerous, but it can be dangerous. I'm going to give you my strong recommendation that you should not be doing it. But let's first talk about what vitamins are. They are necessary organic molecules. By organic, meaning that they contain carbon. And they're necessary in your diet They don't yield any usable energy, but they serve as the best analogy I can make. They're like collaborators with enzymes to help you break down stuff that is in your diet to allow you to extract usable stuff from it. Because they're not used as a source of energy or for building, you need them in relatively small amounts, and we tend to consume all of them in the food that we eat. The best analogy I can make for vitamins is this. They're like having a security guard at an art museum. That if you don't have them, you're in trouble, right? If there were no security guards at a museum, that would be a problem. On the other hand, once you have a sufficient amount, let's say the Getty Museum has 100 guards at their art museum, that's going to probably provide the level of security they need. What if we upped it from 100 to 1,000 security guards? Do you get any additional benefit? Not really. And you might say, all right, maybe a little bit more. What if you go from 1,000 to 10,000 security guards? Or from 10,000 to 100,000 security guards? You don't get any additional benefit, and that's the role that vitamins tend to play. The vitamins, I'll talk about this, we break them down into two groups based on whether or not they dissolve in fat or water. I'll do the fat-soluble first. They are things like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, something called vitamin K, and they have multiple functions, so I'm not giving you everything that they do. As I said, they are organic molecules, and they work with an enzyme. They attach to an enzyme, and then they allow the enzyme to help build something or help break something down. Question?
So if you're already sick and you take like more vitamin C, like emergency or something, is that actually good?
No.
No? How does this airborne?
Sure. Well, so the question was, if you're sick and you start consuming extra amounts of vitamin C, such as the thing Emergen-C, will it help you? No, there have been hundreds, literally hundreds of studies, double-blind, randomized, controlled studies on vitamin C. And the biggest champion of this was a guy named Linus Pauling. And he's the only guy to ever have won 2 Nobel Prizes that he didn't share either of them. So he is a smart guy. He believed that it would reduce the duration of your cold or the incidence of whether or not you got the cold or not. And it was a sad case of someone who was so attached to his hypothesis that in the face of lots and lots of evidence that said it wasn't true, he continued to believe it. And so with the case of a water-soluble vitamin, I'll get down here to vitamin C, that has all sorts of different functions. Water-soluble vitamins, if you consume them in large amounts because they dissolve in water, once you are above the level that your body can use, they get excreted in your urine. Anyway, so the result of all the Linus Pauling studies is that, no, there was no reduction in the probability of getting sick or the duration of the illness. Period. There's no ambiguity whatsoever, and yet it's probably the most commonly held belief about health in the United States. My wife, Julia, almost every night, she loves to take that Emergen-C. You dump a bunch of it into a cup. She says it's the secret to her health. And I say the secret to her health is that she's young. Young people don't get sick. Nonetheless, people take it when they're already sick or before sick. In both cases, neither case had any effect on it. So the issue with vitamin C is that it is important in collagen formation. That's the single most common protein in your body. So it helps your body building stuff. It protects from oxidative damage. It has all these features. But the thing is, your body gets all of the vitamin C that it can use in the food you eat. The food you consume has lots of vitamin C in it. In the case of fat-soluble vitamins, because they dissolve in fat, when you consume them, excess amounts get absorbed in the fat cells of your body and the liver. And so here's a problem. In the case of water-soluble, if you consume too many vitamin tablets, you excrete them. In the case of fat-soluble, you can lead to problems with your liver. When I was growing up, I had a friend, Chris Bruno, and his mother was a nutritionist, but she was another one of these people in the camp that more vitamin C is always good, and so she always had Chris consuming huge amounts of vitamin C. And by huge amount, I mean, you know the 1,000 milligram tablets? Yeah. He would take 60 of these. 60. And he was a big guy, but he would take a giant handful, and he would put them in his mouth, and he would put like this much water, and he thought it was a fun trick, and he would just swallow them all down. And then he thought that it was really funny because his urine was absolutely fluorescent yellow, which to him was the sign that he was getting some benefit from the vitamin C. But what it was that his body, he was taxing his kidneys a little bit, but he was essentially just getting rid of it. And so vitamin C, not a problem. As I say, there's not a problem having extra vitamin C, but a lot of the vitamin tablets that you'll take have the fat-soluble vitamins, and there is some risk with them. Minerals are similar to vitamins, except that they are inorganic. Sorry that this overhead projector is not so readable. The other one, the light burnt out. They're necessary mineral elements. Again, they're not used for energy, so they're required in relatively small amounts. They tend to be collaborators with the enzymes to help your body break down or build up molecules. And they are things like calcium, which is important. We'll see when we look at the nervous system how it works. Very important. Things like phosphorus, which is used in molecule ATP, which your body uses for energy. Potassium, sodium, chlorine, that are all going to be important in how your nervous system works. So they are essential, but they tend to be supplied by the food you eat. So far, 13 different essential vitamins have been discovered, things that are needed, and there are, I forget the number of minerals, but it's a similar number. I don't want you to get the impression that I think that in all cases vitamin supplementation is bad. There are certain situations, though I did have a little bit of notes on vitamin A. Excess consumption can lead to hair loss in men. These are in addition to the liver problems. Excess consumption of vitamin D can lead to growth retardation. And then, as I said, liver damage is a big part of excess fat-soluble vitamins. But also, if you consume too many liver minerals, they tend also to accumulate in the liver. There are some people who benefit from supplementing with vitamins. These tend to be women who lose large amounts of blood during their menstrual period because they can lose iron. There can be a need for supplementation. Postmenopausal women can need to take additional amounts. Pregnant women, women who are lactating also can need more. People who have limited consumption of milk or don't get out into the sun much at all can be deficient in vitamin D, but even that tends to be relatively rare. Question in the back. Good question. The U.S. government, the Food and Drug Administration, has spent a lot of time trying to come up with what they say is their recommended daily allowance. And so the best place to see these, you'll see on the side of a cereal box, they'll tell you what they are. You have to take those with a grain of salt because clearly people vary a lot. If you look at, I looked at the energetic needs of a female versus a male, and we saw that those differ dramatically because our body size differs. So same thing goes with vitamins. They don't say, well, based on your body weight, here's what it is. So they tend to, on those amounts that are recommended daily allowances of vitamins, they're different for all of them. They tend to overcompensate on most of them, but they revise them now and again. So it's just the way they figure it out is to look at people who show signs of deficiency of them. They look at their diet, how much are they consuming. They give them additional amounts until it looks like it goes away. So it's pretty dark ages how it's figured out at this point. You ever see those insect silverfish? They're great, aren't they? Oddly, they are big pests at libraries. You're going to find them much more likely at Biomed Library or at YRL than you are in Ackerman. That is a bizarre thing, and it's not because lots of people are consuming food in the library. It's because of this hint. There are only a few animal species that produce enzymes that allow them to digest cellulose. So now why are they pests at the library? They're eating the books. Yes. Seems crazy. We don't view it as a food source because we can't get any nutritional value out of it. They can, and so they can just chew away at the pages. Finally, our last take-home message here. I'd say this. You've got these essential nutrients. That's defined. Anything that's called essential means you have to get it in your diet because your body can't make them. And the result of being deficient in any of these would be malnutrition. And there's a whole variety of ways you can be malnourished. Another group of people who should be taking vitamin supplements are those who are on a caloric-restricted diet. So if you're on a severe diet, or you're someone who's permanently reducing their caloric intake, they supplement a lot. If you put animals, rodents, on a caloric restriction diet, you have to supplement their vitamins and minerals because then they are deficient. I'm giving a talk this Friday to a group called the Caloric Restriction Society. And these are people, and I still haven't been able to squeeze in to tell you the results about, with rodents, if you restrict their caloric intake to 50%, I have told you this, they increase their longevity significantly, anywhere from 50 to 75%. So there is a group of people, several hundred people in the U.S., who are convinced that if they restrict their own caloric intake to about 50% of what it normally would be, they're going to double their lifespan. They're wrong, but they are, for complicated reasons, but they are very, very disciplined, and they're very up on the research. They understand that by having very few calories, they're right at about 1,500 calories per day, which is really low. They supplement their vitamins and minerals, and they're seeing if it's going to work. It's not super scientific how they're doing it, but a lot of them have been doing it for decades. The average body weight is anywhere from, if you're a male, from 120 to 130 pounds. They're very angry. Sorry, I'm kidding. A lot of them say that after a while they get used to it. Anyway, I'm giving a talk there on Friday that my title is Why Caloric Restriction Won't Make You Live Longer. It's going to be a hostile audience, but I can beat them up. So, all right, I'm going to stop here. I will see you on Thursday.